Well, good morning to those that join us today from Brazil, and good afternoon to those in the UK and in continental Europe. We at the Brazilian Chamber of Commerce in Great Britain are delighted to welcome you in our today's webinar, when we will be discussing how organizations that aim at a more equitable and sustainable future can achieve that. It is clear today that environmental problems and social inequality cannot be a consequence of economic growth. It is also clear that sustainable growth, where the business thrives whilst taking into account the needs of future generations, in terms of the preservation of natural, social, and economic resources. It's not only a need of the organizations themselves, but also a demand of stakeholders. Because the organization's clients, collaborators, and investors also have their own commitments in terms of sustainability, and that they require that businesses be aligned with such commitments. We can see, for example, in the financial markets with green bonds, where investors fund projects with well-defined environmental and social outcomes. It is also clear where big companies recognizing such needs invest in innovation, in social development programs, which are directed at their communities for the generation of income and education, for example. And as we know, on the basis of it all, 196 countries around the world have signed the Paris Agreement, which is an international treaty on the climate crisis, whose central aim is to strengthen the global response to the threat of climate change by keeping a global temperature rise this century well below 2 degrees Celsius, above pre-industrial levels, and to pursue efforts to limit the temperature increase even further to 1.5 degrees Celsius. So this is obviously a super important topic. And in our today's webinar, we are very fortunate to have with us senior banker Ricardo Pires, who has a large experience in the banking markets in London and in Lisbon, and award-winning author and organizational development expert Neil Gaught, the creator of the single organizing idea. And we will hear from them on the path to sustainability and on how the single organizing idea can assist companies with transitional tools that will help them accelerate their progress towards a more equitable and sustainable future for the benefit of all society's stakeholders. So, without further ado on my part, I would like to ask Ricardo Pires to please start our webinar today on this fascinating topic. Ricardo.
Thank you very much, Vera. Good afternoon to everyone. Good morning if you're hearing me from Brazil. Bom dia, boa tarde, consoante o caso. Now, sustainability and business focus on transitioning organizational development. It's really a pleasure to be on this event organized by the Brazilian Chamber, to have you all participants joining in. Now, I believe we all understand what sustainability is about, but I'll just do a quick recap. Next slide, please. I'm just waiting for the next slide. Okay, so we have a planet crying for help, and scientists have been quite adamant and clear about this. I mean, no matter how you read it, basically, and I just chose the Stockholm Resilience Center, for instance, which defined 9 planetary boundaries along which the planet can actually live in harmony and in a healthy way. And we are really exceeding it on at least 4 of the boundaries. I mean, climate change is one of them. Biodiversity loss is another one. Land system change and biogeochemical flows, they all are unbalancing the healthy functioning of this planet, basically. So there is clearly an environmental issue that needs to be addressed. Next slide, please. And society as well is having its own problems, and society is bidding for improvement. And this goes from basic human rights to poverty, unemployment, corruption, having equal opportunities, just to name a few. So clearly there are societal issues that need to be clearly solved and improved. Next slide, please. So society, the path to sustainability, it's really about, there's many ways of defining it, but I probably just to concentrate and make it simple and to touch on two important aspects. One is taking good care of the planet. The other one is evolving to a better society. This actually means that all society stakeholders, they really need to act responsibly to ensure the well-being of current and future generations. So the environment is encircles the whole thing. That's where society plays in. The economy that actually works for the society. Financial services, for instance, within the economy also having their own leverage and helping with the economy and society. And the government also having a role to play. Other society stakeholders, like from simple households to communities, science, academia, NGOs, etc., they all have a role to play just to make sure that we can achieve those two sustainability outcomes, basically. Next slide, please. And of course, urgent action is required. That's a very important aspect. This is not something that we have to concern about, worry ourselves about in the future, years to come. It's actually now that we need to actually act. Next. So, if you could, yeah. So 4 pillars of sustainability, you could argue, and they come from the previous slide. So you can have an environmental pillar, health of the planet. We can have a human pillar, just making sure that we have the well-being of people wherever they are. A society pillar, basically, which certainly has to do with the way the society as a whole works. And the UN SDGs actually is just illustrate really what needs to be done. And an economic pillar, because the economy is still easier to support society and humankind. And of course, profitability needs to be also an important part of it. Next one. So if you try to look for references for sustainability, because it's all right to enunciate the big principles, but what does it mean in practice? Well, in practice, for instance, the UN SDGs, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, they actually try to address what needs to be done in a compartmental way in many respects of society and environment, basically. We also have heard about the Paris Agreement. Vera has already mentioned it. Basically, the Paris Agreement, of course, should distill into nationally determined contributions for carbon emissions, and then further down into government policies and regulations that will assist and guide all society agents and economic agents to act, basically. But equally, science and technology, and very importantly, ethics and values are quite important in establishing the references along which we should actually develop our efforts. Next, please. So I will briefly talk about 5 key challenges and corresponding opportunities that we face once we deal with the path to sustainability. The first one is economic growth conundrum, as I call it. The second one is the resistance to change. The third one is really actually doing what you're saying you are supposed to do. The fourth one is navigating a transition. The fifth one is transparency. So let's start with the first one. Next, please. So the first one, and for me probably one of the most important ones, is what I call the economic growth conundrum. What does this mean? Well, if you look at the left-hand side of that graph, now the human activity and economic activity are having a footprint on the environment, on the planet, which is beyond its equilibrium, its health limits, basically. So the first big challenge really to bring this footprint down to within planetary limits, basically. Now, the second aspect, which actually is a bit conflict with the first one. Sorry, just going back, please. One more, please. So the second aspect, right axis, actually talks about the global social well-being, which we are certainly short of that. We are short of it in today's world, but actually to achieve that, we have to achieve that amidst a growing world population within a massive world inequality. So how can we actually just achieve all these at the same time? It's really a daunting challenge. So to achieve it, next please. I think next slide, please. We have to have a combination of several aspects. Can I just have the next slide, please? I'm not sure if there's any issue with that.
Sorry, Ricardo, just got an issue.
No worries. But anyway, just to achieve this requires a combination of various efforts, basically. I mean, one is really you have to rely on technology, because technology will play an important part in how we use resources, basically, and how we achieve all satisfaction of human needs, basically. Just look at what happened in renewable energies recently. We also have to look at a more efficient use of resources, basically. Circular economy will actually play an important role in this, as will play a development of more efficiency in processes. We also have to change our habits. It only can happen if our habits do change, if we don't think about consumerism and think about a sustainable use of our resources given our needs, basically. So, for example, do not do much business travel by air, for instance, just to name a very small example, basically. But I think the important aspect is that this relies in achieving a true and effective international compromise and collaboration, with the right share of responsibility by the more developed nations. I mean, if you think about the COPs, think about COP26 in Glasgow, for instance, it's going to take place later this year, and people have high expectations. I do hope that they materialize in actually real actions. But when you look back at other COPs, like the COP25, and you think, well, what did go wrong? And I think that the nations have not yet come together to see what's the share of effort that each one is going to take, and the sum of those shares actually need to solve the global problem, basically. So this is a very important issue just going forward. We have to stop also thinking about economic growth and GDP as being the sign of the health and economy. Sustainable development is really what matters, and this will require other indicators just to make sure that we're taking good care of society and environment. And we have to rethink capitalism, because it's not a lot about profit anymore, and profit will solve the rest. It doesn't. It hasn't. This has to change. We need to consider people and planet alongside profit. Next, please. So the second challenge is resistance to change. And I think that if you think about human nature, it can be sometimes dominated by inertia. I mean, vested interests, status quo, defending the status quo plays such a powerful role and really detracts us from actually engaging a true change. The resistance to change in business, for instance, can be seen in the way we look at short-term, look at quarterly results, semi-annual results, but ignore the long-term impacts of all this, ignore the externalities, the impacts on society and environment. The narrow focus, just the primacy of shareholder versus not thinking enough about all the other stakeholders. So this resistance cannot happen. We need to move from here. Next, please. So the risks of inaction are tremendous. They can be regulatory, they can be technological, leading to obsolescence of one's products and services, basically. The consumer and society are expecting more. Look at what millennials and Generation Z are demanding. Look at what investors are now demanding, shareholder activism. Reputation issues are on the line. Litigation risk will increase. Ultimately, we are really dealing with survival of one's business, basically, if one does not adapt and change. There's a clear opportunity to proactively engage in envisioning a better world and act effectively according to it. Quite important. The next challenge is really walking the talk, which means it's not enough just to say nice things and the right things. You really have to act. It's not enough just to state the purpose and strategy and then not act, or not act in a corresponding effective way. It's not enough just to say that I'm going to be carbon neutral in 2050, but what am I doing tomorrow or today? It's not enough just to consider sustainability as a bolt-on to the current strategy. It goes beyond that. It's not just like adding something to feel good about it and say, I've done my job. No, it's actually more than that. You have to do a true introspection and change and look at the essence of what your business is doing, basically. Next one, please. So I think the question is really, are the actions that I'm taking effectively producing a positive impact on planet and society? And that's where we can actually put into perspective the difference between a genuine approach and a superficial approach. Where a genuine approach actually is more, it goes deeper, goes to the roots of the issue and solves them. You see, like we have to have a clear vision, beliefs, and values. We need to look at transforming business at core, and Neil will discuss this later on. We have to align our short and long-term targets and also our strategies and our organization governance and our practices, basically. We need to carefully implement and select targets to assess the results. We have to involve stakeholders. And one very, very important thing, we have to foster collaboration with all stakeholders, because this is not a problem of each one just acting on its own. It's actually a problem, a global problem, solved by collaboration between everyone. That's the only way it's going to work, basically. Next slide, please. So the fourth challenge really needs to consider the navigation aspect of transition, basically. So we need a compass, you need the route, you need some guidelines on how you're going to do that. And I must say there's still some lack of universally accepted standards nowadays. Of course, the thing is changing. I mean, I've referred to the global reference like the UN SDGs or the Paris Agreement, but there are other evolving standards as we speak, basically just gaining universal acceptance. Look at the EU taxonomy, just to help define what are environmental and sustainable activities. Look at the science-based targets, which will, depending on the sector you're operating on, just define the right road to emissions reduction within the time frame of 2050, basically. Or the UN Global Compact, which actually sets out what are the basic aspects to consider when you try to uphold human rights. Now, the materiality analysis is something that's very important, because you really need to focus where it matters most, where the outcome can be more meaningful. So what any business needs to do the right materiality analysis. The science will be adamant and important just to help with the right references as we move along, especially for the environment issues, basically. And as I just mentioned, collaboration between industry, with policy makers, regulators, with NGOs, academia, communities, is going to be paramount just to make sure that we are going to succeed on this effort, basically. Next one, please. Transparency is quite important, because we live in a society which is increasingly connected and able and willing to scrutinize. Now, all businesses need to remain plugged in to the society, to all stakeholders and society at large, basically, which means actually sharing everything, sharing vision, sharing the plans, the efforts, the outcomes, sharing the problems as well, sharing the solutions. It's really a collaborative type of effort. I mean, I'll just give an example if you don't do that. I mean, for those that actually like football, you just saw recently when the owners of certain powerful European football clubs just decided to announce the creation of a Super League. Now, you saw the kickback immediately from the football governing authorities, from the supporters of the clubs. But those owners made a big mistake. They did not consult with who matters, the stakeholders. And look what's happened. It's not going to go ahead. This happens in business as well. It will happen in business more and more. You really need to bring in stakeholders and be transparent about what you're doing all over, basically. Next one. So finally, where to start? I mean, clearly, you can ask the question, I understand all that, but where we're going to start if you haven't started yet, of course. And I think that it's important to have a vision. It's important to have beliefs and values that are sustainable, basically. And this ultimately has to lead to outcomes for the good of society, for the good of the planet. You have to have a strategy to do that. You have to have an organization, a governance, and a culture to make that achieved. Now, today we are focusing on organization, governance, and culture, and now it interacts with all the critical aspects of this graph here. So this is the point where I hand over to Neil just to develop this theme. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to answer any questions you might have later on. Neil, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Ricardo. I'm delighted to take part in this, and thank you to the Brazilian Chamber of Commerce for asking us along. Thanks for that introduction, Ricardo. I suppose the big question is, after everything that you've heard that Ricardo's talked about, the first thing is to say it's probably not a surprise to any of you anymore. You know, over the past 2 or 3 years, our media, barring coronavirus, has been dominated by climate change and the effect on society. And clearly, there's a sense of urgency. And that urgency is really rippling down to businesses. And actually, this was from a survey Bain & Company did, management consultants did, back in 2018, a year after I wrote my first book. But companies even then were saying that they felt, 90% of them, that they would need to change the way they operate in the future. And 38% of them, those companies, feel that they might have to do that quite radically. And actually, if you looked last week, you would have seen in the oil industry the tremendous amount of disruption that's beginning to happen there, where a lot of the things that Ricardo was talking about with stakeholders, investors electing new directors onto boards, on shareholders saying we want change, we want things to be speeded up, and we don't want this lobbying going on, and governments actually taking on oil companies as well. And yet, despite all of this pressure, the fact is that most companies will change failure in the future over change, because mainly they perceive change as being so difficult. And that is very reasonable. That's very kind of understandable, if you like. The reason why it's understandable is that, you know, for generations, the way we've measured the success of businesses has been about the bottom line. You know, what's objective, easy to measure targets, short-term sort of mind-led realities like financial results, projects completed, business developed. We have measures for this. This is how you run businesses. You know, this is how we've been brought up to run businesses. All very, very short-term, all down to what kind of profit have we made. And these others, these less tangible things are much more difficult, much more subjective, difficult to measure. They're long-term, they're not mind-led. Some of them are emotionally led, why you would take a company on a particular direction. And they're based on ideals and not always on realities. And this is really difficult. And ESG, CSR, branding and values and relationships, things like that fit into that category, as does sustainability. And still today, whilst there is worldwide recognition of how you measure profit and financial success, there is no one single way, agreed way of measuring how sustainable a business is. Although there are many, many models out there, and there is consensus beginning to form. And that's where we come in to some degree as well. So what you end up with within organizations, within businesses, understanding what this pressure is everyone's trying to find their own way. How do we solve this? There's, you know, where do we go and seek the advice? What do we actually do? And within any organization, any business, no matter how big it is, although the biggest businesses have the biggest issues because they're so siloized, is what you end up with is kind of disorganized multitude of competing ideas fighting against the status quo, but not really united in that fight. So there's a realization that change needs to happen, but how do you do it? And that's what we want to try and tackle. But first, let's just talk about what happens. What kinds of business are we talking about that can change? Well, Ricardo talked about walking the talk of being a challenge, and there is that. So what we've done with a single organizing idea and the way we look at the market, if you like, these different kinds of companies, we've got them down to 4 types of companies. The first group we call squatters, and these are traditional businesses that really don't even pretend to have a social purpose. You know, they are about maximization of profit. They're on about satisfaction for their owners. It is short term. They're not going anywhere fast. And really, these are the kind of dinosaurs, if you like. you know, just like alligators and crocodiles are dinosaurs, right? There are still some of them around, but the vast majority of them are extinct. And these kinds of companies are likely to become extinct over the next 20 years as we come up to 2030 and these big critical dates. We have another group of companies that we call emperors. And again, these are affected by change. What they are is basically saying, we understand that having a purpose and a social purpose is important. The easiest thing we can do is therefore make ourselves look like we have that purpose. And so what you see today in the market is a huge number of companies going out there and making these purpose promises. The problem is, given how connected society is today and how invested the generations, Gen Z, millennials, but also consumers of any generation, and more importantly, investors in these companies, they are being called out, and they will be increasingly called out for not doing what they need to do. The other group that we have that are doing the walking and maybe not so much of the talking, so in a sense, these guys are doing their bit, are the box tickers. These are the people that are basically complying with policies as they're coming out. They're living within the regulations. Okay, so when an external watchdog says, look, we need to do this, then they do it. So in a sense, they're being very smart at managing their reputations. What we're interested in is these companies that we call champions. These companies really understand that change is entirely necessary. They understand that change needs to happen from the core of the business. In other words, put sustainability at the core of the business. And they also understand that by doing that, they open up all sorts of new opportunities for themselves. And that kind of idea of a new kind of company, a 21st century company, is being shaped by the things that are happening around it. And those companies that grasp that and actually understand it are those that are fit for the future. What you can do, and I think Lena's going to share a link with you in the chat box now, is we've created a bit of technology. It's called a scorecard. You can go into that scorecard. It takes 4 minutes to complete, but you can see now very, very quickly, this is all based on a much more sophisticated assessment systems that we have, but you can actually see where your business stands today in terms of how sustainable it may be when it comes to its core purpose, values, its positioning, how it's linked to the external ecosystem that it's a part of, how you're measuring success, and to what degree you're implementing a sustainable strategy. So I recommend that you might just go and give that a go. And this slide here just gives you an idea of how things have changed from 2016, just in the last few years. You can see I've actually highlighted vision to make the world a better place. This survey is done by GlobeScan. And actually what people are expecting is not for businesses just to do their bit, but actually to take the lead. And on the left-hand side, the news article there, or the advert there, comes from Patagonia, a business that decided to take the lead 2 or 3 decades ago and actually say this is important. And there are quite a few businesses that have been doing this kind of thing and preparing for the future and understanding how the future is going to work and taken on this leadership role through their businesses for quite a long time. Just in the same way as single organizing idea as a tool and a methodology and a technology that I'm going to explain in a moment has been around since 2006. Businesses, the bottom line is businesses must transition. They must transition in order to compete and to thrive and to meet stakeholders' demand to contribute to a better world. That is the bottom line. That absolutely is the bottom line. It's time for businesses not to have 2 separate strategies. Ricardo talked about this idea of a sort of social strategy being bolted on, or a social strategy where the CSR people, the ESG people sort of join up with the brand people, and there's a lot of marketing stuff done. what we need to do is actually mix the economic and social strategy and combine them and bring them together into a social strategy. And that's exactly what single organizing idea does. It's exactly what it is. It's taking the economic purpose and the social purpose of the business and tying those two things together in order to be able to deliver sustainable progress, not just for the business, but for all of those that are invested in the business in one way or another. And this is absolutely key. Single organizing idea literally says what it does on the tin. It's one idea, one single focus, the North Star of the organization. And here you can see with this slide, I'm sorry I'm having to go through these slides quite quickly, but, and by the way, we're very happy to share these slides afterwards, but you can see the benefits straight away of doing this. It improves a multitude of things. If you think about sustainability in terms of what Ricardo was talking about, you know, yes, environmental sustainability, you know, climate change is a thing that dominates the news, right? But we're talking about human sustainability as well, the wellness of people, employee retention, having a sense of purpose around what people do. We're talking about social sustainability, where there's real transparency. People really understand and are engaged with companies. And we're talking about the idea of economic sustainability as well. In other words, that the business itself will continue to be profitable, maybe not growing in the way that we once pursued growth at the cost of everything else, but ensuring that our companies are part and parcel of our societies and are there to thrive on behalf of everybody. And these lists, I hope you've been looking at as I've been talking here, but you can see what a single organizing idea improves, attracts, and delivers. And there are all of these things are very, very attractive to investors. Okay, so this kind of social long-term value creation for investors that are looking at the pension kind of investors, not the Wall Street guys, the day traders. We're talking about pension investors where the vast majority investment comes from. They want to know that these businesses are sustainable. And actually, we estimate, well, we know actually from the companies that we work with, that the return on the investment in actually embedding, identifying, defining a single organizing idea and embedding it into your core strategy, putting sustainability on strategy, will give you a minimum return of 5 to 1, which is quite a return on any kind of investment. Okay, I could show you many more slides to give you the best the business case for sustainability, but again, I think it'll be shared with you in the chat box, the link to this very good paper that was written back in 2016. It really does give you the business case for sustainability. But let's move on and just look at a few businesses that have single organizing idea, and here's a list of them here. If you look on the right hand side, they are a real mixture of different types of businesses. There are small businesses like Data Talk, which is a small business out of New Zealand, which helps countries actually, or developing countries, small countries, collect tax. There's Catholic Relief Service, a faith-based organization. But there are big commercial outfits, for instance, like Europool System, which is the biggest logistics company in Europe, delivering fruit and vegetables throughout Europe and here in the UK as well, with a single organizing idea around maximizing circular value, which is something that it does every single day through everything that it does. All of its policies are based around this idea of attracting and retaining people that understand what maximizing circular value is about, that can bring ideas to that, can operate in a way that makes that happening. A UK example would be Community Clothing, which is run by Patrick Grant, a celebrity fashion designer and clothing entrepreneur, who was work to bring factories online that are otherwise out of work, out of season, if you like, with a whole single organizing idea about building pride in the numbers that they achieve, the clothes they wear, people that wear them, etc., etc. So really strong single organizing idea. One of the strongest ones is Volvo, of course, and its idea of safety. And since 1927, so this isn't new thinking, this has been around for a long time. Volvo has had at its core this idea of safety. And of course, in today's world, that's really playing a huge part. So here's the thing. How do you transition your business? And, I'd like to say that it's actually a lot simpler than you think, okay? And what I wrote my first book, which was just called Core, How a Single Organizing Idea Can Help Business Change for Good, back in 2017. Last year, we published the playbook. The playbook gives you every single tool there is available in the process of transitioning your company. So I can tell you now, there are many, many frameworks out there. There are many principles, if you like. There are many organizations out there that are saying, this is how you do it. And this is another one. But where I really wanted to deliver something that was for free, that everybody could get hold of, was to really spell out what the process is and to make it as simple as we possibly can. Now, what's missing out of the playbook, because the technologies come along later, our assessment technology is the assessment part of it and the technology around that. But I will be explaining how that works. So let's go through it very, very quickly. I'm conscious of the need to answer questions, so I'll try and go through as quickly as possible. Transitioning your business to a 21st century business model, okay? So what we're talking about is not, a mission statement that only the senior management know about or care about, or actually, in my experience, often don't know about, but just know about the numbers. So what we're doing is we've got 3 stages. The first stage is about doing your homework and identifying what your single organizing idea could be. The second stage is about then defining that, saying this is what our organizing idea is. These are the values that underpin it and the positioning statement that explains it. And then actually doing the job of aligning with it. In other words, implementing it and making sure that all of your business functions align with it. And I'll just explain that a little bit more as we go through these next few slides. So this is the identifying phase. Now, I can't explain every single tool, but I can show you what the playbook kind of looks like. So basically here we've got desk research. Desk research is literally doing your homework, understanding how the environment around your business and indeed inside your business has changed. What is going to happen in the future? On these different levels of pestle analysis, what's going to happen politically, economically, socially, environmentally, legally, that's going to affect your business. How many businesses, besides the really big businesses, actually ever bother to look at that and understand how they fit in the future? So being able to do that desk research is really important. Ricardo mentioned the importance of stakeholders and actually talked about the European Super League as a great example of an organization that decided to implement something from top down that had no understanding whatsoever of stakeholders and where they are and what they perceive to be the opportunity that your business might have. Okay. Another key point is interviews. And again, here we give the templates and the questions to ask of your stakeholders to understand, dive deeper with key stakeholders around what they're looking for when it comes to your business and the way that it works. And that's both internally and externally. The fourth tool on this slide is then workshops. Single organizing idea is unique in that it's a completely collaborative process. And we aim to try and get as many employees as possible to contribute what they think and, really importantly, what they feel about the company that they work for and what they see as its ideal future. building a strategy by collaborating with people inside and outside not only gets buy-in to the process of change, but it humanizes the business. And that is a call that's been made over and over again today, particularly by young people, millennials that are moving into these management areas now, and Gen Z that are moving into the workforce. For them, having purpose and meaning to what they do is very important, and being able to contribute to a strategy is absolutely key. And if you are interested in this subject, you'll see some of these leading companies that I talked about earlier, these champion companies, are engaging young people in strategy. It is not necessary for it to be done by people who are, frankly, possibly out of touch with both technology and what sustainability looks like, and only know how to run business. It's about combining them all. So that's one group of organizations. The next thing is then positioning, looking at where does your business fit when you look at your competitors, and are they your competitors, or actually are they your partners when it comes to making commitments to society? Where are your suppliers? How are they positioned? It's all well and good to dictate down a supply chain, you must do this, but actually you could go far further and collaborate to come up with ideas and to come up with new ways of doing things by understanding what their challenges are and recognizing they're very likely to be the same sorts of challenges that you have. The next thing we look at is social contribution analysis. Okay, so most businesses today, they do give money to charity. They do philanthropy. You know, there are, you know, that kind of idea of, I'm going to teach you how to fish sort of thing. So it's not just giving money away, right? Giving fish, but it's helping other organizations implement strategies. And there's corporate social responsibility and share a thing called shared value, which is about actually working on special projects where the company can make profits and stakeholders can also benefit. The problem with those four places is that they are bolted on things. They're not the purpose, the greater purpose of the business. And what we're looking at is where single organizing idea fits is with sustainability. And it's about putting a sustainable strategy, such as safety, into the core of the business. Two other areas that we look at: touch point analysis, looking at where is it that your business actually interacts with different stakeholders, and where are the opportunities to be able to make positive differences there. To what degree are you aligned with your single organizing idea at these key touch points? And then finally, crowdsourcing. How do you actually, going out, you know, we with single organizing idea using technology can talk to thousands of people using crowdsourcing technology. So really important thing. The other bit that is missing here is a base assessment that we do, which is a bit like the scorecard that I told you about earlier, which gives us an indication right then and there, where is the business today and where does it need to get to in the future? To what degree do we need to help transition this business? Once we've done that work, and by the way, you know, just in case you feel daunted by, wow, that's an awful lot of work to do, working with our advisors, you'll find that for individual employees, yes, some of them might be involved in an interview, some of them might be involved with doing a survey, being involved with the crowdsourcing. They might have to take half a day out to do a workshop. Even the senior management team don't have to spend masses of time. That is not a lot of time. It takes in an average sized business, you know, if say a business of small, medium business, it takes 2 months to be able to do that work, to do that homework. And then you're into the defining part. And that's all about taking all of that evidence and then really distilling it, really boiling it down into three compartments, into three key elements rather. Your elevator pitch, basically a statement, 2 or 3 pithy sentences that says, we do this because of this. Underpinned by values that have been identified through the identify process, which are seen as being critical to helping ensure you deliver that single organizing idea, and that can be put into systems to measure against. Really, really important that values are understood, not to be these things that are just put up on a wall, but are really actual tools that are used day in, day out to help make decisions and decide what actions to take and what not to take. And then your guiding star, which is basically a simple and memorable call to action, like safety, for instance, or pride, or maximizing circular value, or in our case, accelerating progress. That's the case of single organizing idea, our organization. That's what we're about. Compelling, sustainable over the long term, just captures what your core purpose of your business or enterprise is. And here's an example, okay? Feel good is something that was done for a major fashion business. This is about feeling good about, you know, not just the clothes that you're wearing, but all the other things with feeling good about a fashion business. And it might seem like two very simple words, but when you think about it, when you think about how that applies to financials, to procurement decisions, to how you plan out what you're going to buy, what you're not going to buy, and who you're going to invest in, that actual do we feel good about this? Why would we feel good about doing this? That really becomes a call to action. So you can see or get the sense of how that might feel. And of course, not just coming up with a defined framework like that, it's very important then to stress test it. And again, we have tried and tested method for doing exactly that. Senior teams, senior management teams looking at that framework and saying, is it credible? Is it resilient? Is it relevant? Is it commercial? You know, will it help us maintain our commercial success? Is it beneficial to these, to people and planet? And is it really truly a single organizing idea that we can rally around and make happen? Once you've got that thing and you've stress tested it, and our advisors again will help you stress test it, it's then about aligning your business with that single organizing idea. And what we have here is a graphic that shows what alignment looks like. Single organizing idea, your business has adopted an ideal position for the future. A position that will deliver sustainable business and societal benefits, okay? A position that leadership can talk about, that stories and experiences can be told and built around, that a culture and the behavior of an organization can align with, okay? And that people outside of the organization can understand and actually buy into and actively contribute to. And all of these dotted lines, if you like, there, if you can imagine with the way that we assess things, we're looking at to what degree are all these elements aligned with this single organizing idea. So you have something that's far more than just a purpose promise. You have an idea that you're aligning with, and it's all the functions of your business. So each individual function, communications, your products and services, systems and processes, people and culture, innovation, sales and marketing, over the top of it, financial decisions, all aligned with the single organizing idea. This one thing that says, how do we row the boat, not faster, but more efficiently? So it drives real efficiencies into these parts of the business. Of course, with any strategy is great, but as the very famous management consultant, the sort of father of management consultancy, or strategy rather, Peter Drucker said, you know, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Now, in the identify phase and the defining phase, you will have done a lot to actually bring people on board and to help them understand the strategy and help them actually make a greater commitment to strategy. So within businesses, you have different types of people, and actually you want to have different types of people. you don't want to have many spectators, I have to tell you. They're the people that can be quite disruptive. So they understand what's trying to go up, what's going on, but they're not necessarily committed to it because it doesn't work in their favor. You know, people who want the CEO's job, for instance, I don't know, but there's a multitude of those kinds of people. Luckily, there's not many of those kinds of people that are in any business. The vast majority of people in businesses are settlers. They go to work every day, they do their jobs, they do their roles really, really well. They don't, unfortunately, have the opportunity to be able to contribute in a very tangible way to that thing. So actually moving and equipping people to become stars, where they not only understand the strategy and be committed to it, they have the tools to actually deliver it. And that's where single organizing idea really, really begins to work. And remember, they've invested in this because you've asked them to do that. And you can, you know, again, measure where individual people are. So each one of these crosses here, if you like, is really understanding, you know, what numbers of different people do we have in different elements. Seekers, by the way, are great people as well. They might come into your business for quite a short time, but they can bring ideas with them and all sorts of things. So moving them, still being seekers, but moving closer to that stars area is something that we you know, any business should be aiming to do. Once you've got that, you know, moving settlers from being settlers to stars in a business is a two-phase sort of thing. The first thing is about communicating, informing, educating, and then the second part is then creating workshops and ideation or whatever it might be that really allows people to get involved. And I know a lot of you will be thinking, well, where's the time going to come from to do this stuff, right? But that's the point of old-fashioned businesses. Traditional businesses don't think like this, but new, vibrant businesses that are thriving in today's economy and in the future economy do this stuff. They've re-engineered the way that their business is organized and the way that it works. I'm going to speed through. To underline that, you know, Gary Hamel, actually another, you know, leading light strategist, you know, very few companies have made innovation everyone's role, but the ones that have, okay, that's really, you know, put them on another level from very modern businesses. And actually, these are photographs. You know, I've run hundreds of workshops myself and my team all around the world where we've asked people to contribute. And, you know, again, people say, well, you know, not everybody's creative, not everybody's got ideas, but actually it's the way that you do it and it's the way that people contribute. And suddenly they find, wow, we made ideas about, you know, how we see our business today and how we'd like to see it in the future. So it's entirely possible. It's entirely possible to ask your people, not only in the business, but the stakeholders outside of it, is if this is our single organizing idea, if this is what we're about, what are the things that we should start doing? What should we stop doing? And what things that are we already doing that we should keep on doing because it fits, okay? And there are many things that your business will be doing already. And all of this can be then put down onto a canvas, which sets out what you're going to do in those 6 different functions of the business, the goals and resources that you need to do this. And all of this is digitized, so it's very easy to fill in and start plotting that stuff. And then finally, I'm going to do this very quickly. I think I've got a minute left to run through this part. It is no point in doing all this work. There is no point, if you like, saying, you know, we have this single organizing idea. It'd be like saying we have this purpose promise. Actually, what we want to be able to do is to measure the impact of it, and to measure the impact of it truly in the spirit of measuring the social impact, the human impact, the economic impact, and the environment impact. So this gives you a bit of an idea, this slide here, of a roadmap, you know, let's say from April 2021 through to next year. So over 1 year. So to identify a single organizing idea, you know, we're saying April, May, June. To define the strategy, so that strategic framework, you know, it could take 2 weeks, actually. I mean, we've been a bit over generous there with the time, you know, just a couple of weeks to be actually define the strategic framework. And then you can see this pink triangle then, this is then the alignment and the organizational development, the transitioning. That's the transitioning there. And all along that, you're actually measuring at the same time. And these are our assessments that are done. Base assessment, as I explained right at the very beginning. We then, on a monthly basis, are taking pulse surveys. These take 4 or 5 minutes for people to engage with them. They're measured on behaviors, how people are behaved, not a traditional survey. I can't go into all the detail now, it'd take too long, but and to explain the technology, even I find challenging. But basically, it's based on behaviors. Behaviors result in actions, and actions result in outcomes, and that's what we measure throughout a year. And then finally a core report at the end of every year to understand what we're doing. So what we've aimed to do is, rather than do assessments every 3 years, which is what B Corps do, we think that actually the answer is to be able to measure things ongoing. So it's like a live dashboard, and this is what that looks like. Actually getting a score, understanding where you are on these different levels, and understanding what that score actually means. And with our system, you become certified SOI as soon as you've defined that, as soon as you've defined your SOI. But what we then do is then we measure every month. So you need to retain that certification. So it's not sort of months and months and months and months and months trying to get certified. We give you the certificate, and it's then about retaining it. Okay, so that's me done. I think I'm a couple of minutes over, but I'm sorry about that. Like I say, just a reminder, you can look at the scorecard, have a go at that, take you 4 minutes to fill in, but I'm very happy now to take some questions if we have any. Thank you.
Right, Neil, I will step in. I've got a couple of questions here, and of course, welcome to answer more if they keep coming. I'll start with this one here. It's a long question, so I'll try to summarize it basically. If the question is if we see a necessary change in the way we currently live, given the state of intensive use of resources, which almost are not enough just to keep our current living for developed world, not to mention developing world and the growing population, basically. And also, is there anything going on as to see what the right equilibrium is and avoid a climate catastrophe, given exactly that trend to keep on behaving with a longer economic growth with intensive use of resources, basically. Would you like to have a go at it first?
Yeah. And Ricardo, maybe you can answer a bit of this as well. I'm not a sustainability expert. My expertise is in, I know a great deal about sustainability, but my expertise is in organizational development and helping businesses actually transition in order to bring sustainability into the core of their business. I think that there's, a lot of companies are taking on and have set goals for becoming carbon neutral, for instance, but it's a bolt-on exercise. And our argument is that unless it becomes the central thing, then really you've got an issue. So I think that, what I showed with that slide earlier, that there's lots of, with the sort of illustration of people wandering along different arrows, everybody's going in different ways, it's uncoordinated. And that's, I suppose, my greatest fear is that it's a bit like the report today in the UK, talking a lot about we're planting trees, but at the same time we're building more roads, which are going to add to the problem. It's that kind of not joined up thing. So I think that more and more people are realizing there's an issue, more and more people are wanting to do something about it. Can we avert a catastrophe? I think people underestimate how urgent this all is.
Certainly. Thanks, Neil. I can certainly add something. Do you mind just putting back the slide of my first challenge I allude to, the one that talks about the economic growth conundrum? Because I believe, so that's one of the first ones, because I believe this question is very much to do with the first challenge I referred during my speech, which is, yes, there is a big challenge, a daunting challenge I refer to, whereby we need to decrease the footprint on the environment, society, from the economic activity, human activity. That's absolutely one. So we need to decrease the footprint that you can see on the left side, and at the same time we need to increase the well-being of the people and society, basically, against the background of a growing population and massive world inequality, basically. So the question is really, how can we do all that? Is there any thinking going on? There are many things going on for many institutes and universities around the world, and think tanks, basically. But I think on the right-hand side of the slide, I try to answer that in a very simple term, which is it's going to be a combination of several aspects here. I mean, technology will help quite a lot, because technology by itself will help us satisfying our needs through clean technologies, for instance, through more efficient use of resources, basically. But of course, we also have to change our habits. I think I alluded to that. It will not come without a change in consumerism, for instance. We really need to be more, I wouldn't say necessarily frugal, but yeah, that's the direction we need to go into. We're not going to go into caveman again, no, for sure not. We can certainly keep our standards of living. But we have to change our habits and try not to waste anything, and just really have a sustainable behavior as well. And of course, it's quite important also to have this international compromise and collaboration between nations, because the question is really to know how much should each one of the nations contribute to this effort, basically. And clearly, all the nations need to come together on this. That's a huge task. The COPs, 26, probably 27, 28, others to come, will try to answer that. We still a long way to go there. And as I mentioned, it can't be economic growth. You can't measure the health of an economy with GDP anymore. That's gone. We need to look at other indicators that actually at the same time produce the right effects on society and planet. As I mentioned, we need to rethink capitalism. It can't just be growth and profit, that's what matters. Not anymore. We just want to live all better and take good care of the planet. Other indicators need to be sought out. And I think it's going to be a combination of all these, I'd say.
Yeah, I think, just a recommendation for the audience. There's a book called Donut Economics by an economist that came out of Oxford, Kate Rayworth. This living within our means is what the message is, and that is the key thing. So, it's this idea that businesses not growing for the sake of growth to chase profits on behalf of shareholders, but to ensure that they thrive on behalf of all stakeholders. Now, that's a change of mindset. Let's not underestimate how big a challenge that is, but it is a necessary change of mindset. But once you make that change in your mind, then actually the possibilities are huge for those companies that do. We've got another question there, Ricardo.
Yes, another question relates to greenwashing in a business, which means that businesses are not actually meeting the sustainable goals they set for themselves. And how can the regulators and shareholders just start to measure the actual outcomes? Very interesting question.
Yeah.
Do you want to have a go at it first, Neil?
Yeah, sure. So basically, greenwashing is a thing that's been called out because people are recognizing it, right? So, not only the media, but consumers and investors in particular, and employees. It's quite interesting. It's not just greenwashing. There's something called purpose washing as well. And these are those emperors. They're basically saying one thing, but they're not actually doing very much. They're not walking the talk. And they run massive reputational risk. So they run massive reputational risk because, as Ricardo pointed out, governments are beginning to turn around to companies now and say, you actually do have to change. It's not just talking about change. So if we talk about, I'm not going to pinpoint one particular oil company because that would not be fair. But, if I sort of say the kind of Anglo-Dutch, right? Last week, the Dutch government said that company had to, by law, reduce its carbon footprint by 45% by a set date. So no more greenwashing, because that company is amongst another bunch of companies that at the same time as saying they're marketing themselves and saying we're doing all these amazing things, they're also lobbying governments to do extraordinary things like try and reclassify gas as not being a fossil fuel. So you can't have your cake and eat it, and policy will catch up. And the reason why it will catch up is because the voters of the future are worried, not, deeply concerned about the future, and they will vote for the politicians that bring these corporations into line. So whilst you see greenwashing going on, and it will carry on going on, you'll see more and more companies getting around to understanding that they're not going to get away with it, especially when they're sat down with their investors and the investors are asking difficult questions about what are they actually doing, because the investors won't take the chance if they don't think the business is economically sustainable.
Well, thanks, Neil. I can probably just complement a couple of things very quickly. So Neil really alluded to the fact that regulators are already doing it because they are requiring companies to do something and show they are doing, basically. Shareholders, of course, have the challenge not just to meet what regulators are requiring, but they've got to follow their own ethics and values and beliefs and translate this into actions that also show leadership in this respect. I'll probably just point out four things very quickly. One is materiality. It's important just to define what your business is material to in terms of sustainability, so that you can focus on what matters more. Then standards are important, because how to measure, you need to get the right standards and the right metrics there. I think I've alluded to it en passant very quickly, but there are evolving standards that help you do that, from measuring carbon emissions to human rights adherence to setting climate goals according to science as well. I mentioned the science-based metrics there, and there's also reporting. Actually, the government and the regulators, for instance, started with reporting as a critical tool here, because they require companies, starting with banks and insurance companies, asset managers for a start, and listed companies, to have to report what they are doing. So that reporting becomes very important, and has a transparency, the importance of all this, because people will actually be able to see what's effectively being done. So that's the fight against greenwashing, because those reports will have to be clear, it's got to be auditable. And also accreditation is quite important, because we have a third independent party coming in and say, what the company is saying is actually right. We've tested it, it's okay. And everyone can actually look at it, basically. So accreditation is quite important. You can even have ratings. So materiality, standards and metrics, reporting and accreditation, that will help measuring the outcomes as a combat to greenwashing, basically.
Yeah, and let's be frank, it's all coming your way real soon, so if you're not feeling the effects of it already, you will be as the months go by. This stuff is happening, and it's going to carry on happening, and the urgency of it is going to be as the urgency of the situation is realized more and more. Vera, Lena, I just want to make sure we're okay for time.
Sure, we are.
We are? Okay. Have we got any more questions?
I think right now I've reached the end of the questions here. I'm not sure if anyone has got any other question, even from the panel, and very happy to answer, or otherwise.
Yeah. I think we're done, right?
Yep. There seems to be no more questions. But we, I mean, every participant has got our contacts. We're very happy to continue to discuss all these important things as we move along, and we hope that this conversation and this subjects that we've described here will, of course, be the principle of an ongoing dialogue. We're very happy to help and to, in which way we can, your business as well, both me and Neil. So please do contact us if you've got any other questions, if they come back later.
And just a final thing, that we said that we'd actually give away some copies of the playbook. So if you drop me an email, my email address is on the screen there. Or I think Lena might have put it into the chat box. That's great. Drop me an email, and I'll very happily get a playbook to you, a digital version. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
I'll just
look. Thank you so much, Ricardo and Neil, for taking us today through the challenges of turning a business sustainable. And thank you for sharing with us the single organizing idea tenets and methodology, and especially your experience on how to combine the economic and social purposes of the business together and tie them up for the greater good of the business and its stakeholders. I think that clearly the single organizing idea is a very important set of principles and tools, which I hope businesses will continue to make use of more and more. And I have to say, I especially love the idea that was ventilated and discussed today of companies not getting away with not being sustainable. So thank you very much for that. And finally, I would like to thank all of our members and friends who have joined us today, and to invite you to keep supporting the Brazilian Chamber of Commerce by following us on social media. We have a very active LinkedIn account, and joining us in person again as soon as this becomes possible in the UK. We are here to support businesses and, of course, to support the ties between the United Kingdom and Brazil. And we have big plans for when we can meet again in person. And we really look forward to seeing you all again as soon as possible. With that, thank you very much again, Neil, Ricardo, and I wish you all a very good day.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.